The Historical Society of Ottawa acknowledges that as we share these stories from our past, we are on what remains the unceded land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode. This series is a collaboration between the Historical Society of Ottawa and Rogers TV. I'm Ben Weiss. I'm with the Historical Society of Ottawa, where we've been telling Ottawa's great stories since 1898. If you find Ottawa's history as fascinating as we do, I urge you to check out our website, our monthly speaker series, and follow us on Facebook, and enjoy today's segment.
Hi, good day everyone. My name is Dominique Lajoie. I'm a local historian, and today I will tell you the story of the Château Laurier. The Fairmont Château Laurier is an iconic building in Ottawa, and I'm sure everyone has walked by it to admire the nice architecture. The building also has a very interesting story. It all begins at the end of the 19th century when the railway companies were developing throughout Canada and the United States. They quickly realized, these companies, that if you were transporting goods around the country, you could also transport tourists and make a lot of money. So companies like the Canadian Pacific, that was founded in 1881, understood that right away and started to build a series of luxurious hotels all along the railway. For example, in Victoria, in Banff, in Quebec City, in Lac Louise. Another company like the Canadian National, that was founded a little bit later, did the same thing. So the Grand Trunk Railway Company also wanted to do the same thing. The president of that company, his name was Charles Melville Hayes, and he became president in 1909. And that's what he wanted to do, build a series of hotels all along his railway to help the company financially. And he thought, where else to start in the capital of this new country, Ottawa? And he thought, we'll build it right downtown, and we'll build a train station right across the street so people come in and that's the first thing they see. And that is what his plan was. Right off the bat, the Prime Minister at the time, Sir Wilfrid Laurier, he was on board with that idea because he was a Prime Minister that was very visionary for the country. And he wanted to improve the city of Ottawa as the new capital of that country. And so he helped Hayes from the very beginning to acquire the land to build the hotel, especially for the train station. The land where the train station is at the moment used to belong to J.R. Booth, a famous lumber baron at the time, and he had his own personal train station on that land. But it was getting old and needed repairs, so Laurier used his influence to do the transaction for Hayes to buy the land. And so the whole project started, and we are in 1906, and we have to find an architect to build this train station and the hotel. Hayes turns to an American firm. So the architect from New York, Bradford Lee Gilbert. He was also already very famous. He had built a few train stations, the one in Chicago. He was an architect that was starting to use steel in his buildings. So he was very famous. So Hayes decided to hire him. And he decided to start designing the plans. At first, the big question was, where are we going to build the hotel? We kind of knew where the train station would be, but where would be the hotel? At first, they thought we'll put it south of Rideau Street, close to the Rideau Canal. You can see in the picture that's on the screen, it would be a U shape facing the Rideau Canal. But by building a hotel there, you're kind of blocking the way from the railway all the way to Alexandra Bridge. So they decided, let's not do that. Instead, we could build it across the street on the north side of Rideau Street in the south side of the Major Hills Park. Laurier didn't really like that site. He preferred the Nepean Point, right at the top of the hill, the point that is now called the Kiwiki Point. He thought it would be a great view of the river if we build a fancy hotel right there. But Hayes had more of a businessman point of view, and he thought if we build the hotel closer to the train station, when people arrive in the city, they can go straight to the hotel. So in the end, it was that site that was decided. The plans were to be presented to the city on February 14, 1908. A week before, Hayes contacted Gilbert to tell him to cut $1 million from the budget. It was a week before presenting the plan, so he didn't really know what to do. He decided to cut 2 levels of the hotel. The original budget that was given to him was $2.5 million, and then he had to cut $1 million. So easy, we'll just cut 2 levels, 2 floors. When he presented that plan to the city was not impressed. They were expecting a bigger hotel. And so they started to blame Gilbert for those changes. Gilbert never wanted to take the blame and said, hey, it's not my fault. Hayes told me to cut $1 million. So in the end, Hayes, because he didn't want to take the blame, he was replaced. And Hayes, 2 months later, hired another company. That was kind of a bit of a scandal because it was not done in an ethical way. And the new architects that were chosen, it was a Montreal firm, Ross and McFarlane. They were brand new architects. Nobody knew them. And the new plans that they presented to the city in May of 1909 were surprisingly very similar to Gilbert's plan. You can see on the photo on the screen, they're almost identical. A bit of plagiarism there. So it was a bit of a scandal, but it was okay. Hayes didn't mind. He wanted new plans, a new design, a new outside feeling. Gilbert had proposed a Gothic, neo-Gothic architecture. These new architects from Montreal were proposing something more chateau-esque that was more modern at the time. Some of the changes they also did was to add toilets, not add toilets in the room, but changed where the toilets were in the room. The fashion at the time was to put the toilets close to the outside wall of the hotel. Ross and McFarlane decided to put the bathroom, the toilets, close to the door, to the hallway, which was a new way of thinking when they were designing hotels. Nowadays, we couldn't even imagine going into a hotel room and not having the bathroom right close to the hallway. But that was all new at the time. Anyway, so they presented the new plans and they started construction. This hotel was 8 floors with 2 basement floors. It was an L shape along the Rideau Canal. The top floor in the roof, all these little windows you see in the turrets, that was for the maids. That's where they lived. You also had the 3 elevators and about 350 rooms. It was a very big hotel at the time for Ottawa. The rotunda as well, you can see a photo on the screen, the lobby. It was nicknamed the rotunda even though it was almost a perfect square in the dimension. You can see very different from what it is today. There was a fireplace inside, the stained glass door that we still use today to get into the hotel. This was stained glass from New York City, from the Tiffany's studio. There was also a water tank in the roof of the hotel. This water tank could contain 30,000 gallons of water. And the water would come from the city, and it was filtered 3 times before actually filling up the water tank, because people were still afraid of a typhoid outbreak. So they would purify and sterilize the water 3 times, and then put it in the water tank. And it was gravity that would give the pressure into all the rooms and all the sinks. And apparently it was the best pressure in the entire city. The opening of the hotel is linked with a bit of a tragedy. The hotel was supposed to open at the end of April 1912. And Hayes, at the beginning of the month, went to the UK, to London, to meet with the head company to discuss financial issues. And he was traveling with his wife, with 2 daughters, the maid, the personal maid of his wife, his personal secretary, and his son-in-law. and they decided to stay for a bit in London. For their trip back home, they decided to take an invitation of a good friend of Hayes, Bruce Ismay. He invited him to come and join him on the maiden voyage of a brand new luxury steamship crossing the Atlantic for the first time in April 1912. So as you can imagine, they were on the Titanic. And as you can imagine, the Hayes never made it back alive to Canada. His wife, 2 daughters, and the maid, they all survived, but him, his private secretary, and his son-in-law did not. When the news of the tragedy reached Ottawa, the opening ceremonies were cancelled in respect for his family. And the hotel opened with no ceremony on June 1st. The doors just opened and people could come in. That day, there was a few receptions and a silent toast to Hayes, but that was it. There was no special big ceremony to open the hotel. There is a rumor about furniture or maybe even the bust that's in the lobby that were on the Titanic. And I'll tell you a little bit how this rumor came about. The sculptor of the Laurier bust that is in the lobby, he was on the Titanic. His name is Paul Chevry. He was Belgium, and he worked on the bust, and he was traveling to Ottawa for the opening ceremonies. But the bust was never with him on the boat. It was already in the lobby, all ready for the opening. But Paul Chevry survived the sinking of the Titanic, and he was interviewed by journalists. So maybe his accent, or he wasn't really good at speaking English, maybe there was a bad translation. Anyways, the journalist published a story that the bust was lost with the sinking of the ship, but that was not true. And the rumor about furniture on the Titanic destined to the hotel, that's also not true. There was no proof in any of the cargo information of any furniture destined for the hotel. And I mean, the hotel was supposed to open a week later, so everything was already in the hotel ready for the opening. So all of that is just a rumor. But it is bittersweet to open a hotel when your president is not there for the opening. In the 1920s, there was an addition added to the hotel because in 1926, the hotel was full every night. It was overflowing with guests. So by then, the hotel had been purchased by the CN company, the Canadian National Railway Company, and they decided they needed more room. So in 1927, they started building the addition. As you can see in the pictures, that's what created the U shape that we see now with the hotel. This added about 240 rooms. It added the ballroom, it added restaurants, it also changed where the reception desk was. They also modernized the rotunda, and they added a pool and a spa. The pool was very unique. It was actually the very first indoor pool in Canada. And the spa was also top of the notch. It was the best technology in spas that you could attend at the time. In the photo that you see on the screen, you see the style. It was Art Deco, very popular in the 1920s. You could sit under nice heating lamps by palm trees, so you could really feel like you were somewhere far away from the cold winter days in Ottawa. There was also very famous clients or residents of the hotel that the hotel was their home, permanent home. The Prime Minister, R.B. Bennett, he was Prime Minister from the 1930s, 1930 to 1935. And he would stay in Ottawa when the House of Commons was in session. And when he became Prime Minister, the hotel manager offered him to renovate a few rooms and create a large suite for him to stay at the hotel permanently as a Prime Minister. So he agreed. He thought it was a great idea. And he even agreed to pay a percentage of the renovation costs as rent. So he agreed to pay about 6% of the renovation costs. But once the renovation were done and he started living there, he would only pay about $400 rent. That was not 6%. The 6% rent should have been $5,000. And you can imagine, this is in the 30s, in the Great Depression. It was a bit of a scandal. Canadian families had a hard time feeding their families, and the Prime Minister was living in really luxurious suite for almost nothing. Another famous guest staying at the hotel permanently was the famous photographer Yusuf Karsh. He was originally from Armenia. He escaped Armenia to go to Syria, and then he came to live in Canada. That's when he started his career as a photographer. He had his studio at the hotel from 1973 to 1992. And he was living there with his wife from 1982 to 1997. When he closed his studio and retired, he donated a lot of his portraits to the hotel. One of his most famous portraits is the one of Winston Churchill. And you might have heard that recently this portrait was stolen from the hotel. This was discovered in the summer of 2022. In August, an employee saw that the frame of the picture was crooked. So he came over and noticed, this is not the right frame. They took it down from the wall and they noticed, this is not the right picture. It's a copy. So they realized, oh my God, the real portrait has been stolen. They took down all the other portraits in the room to be safe and to make sure that it was only one portrait that had been stolen. And then the hotel sent out a call to the public to try to figure out when was the portrait stolen. So they asked the public to send in photos of that frame to figure out what was the last picture taken of the frame and which one was the first picture taken of the frame. And they realized, all right, the theft happened in that week between Christmas and New Year of 2021. But now we were in August. So possibly impossible to find this portrait. It's somewhere in the world, sold on auctions or around the world. Where is this stolen portrait now? Well, Interpol found it last year. In September of 2024, it was found. The buyer was in Italy, and he bought the portrait without knowing that it was stolen. So they were able to bring it back, and in November of 2024, there was a big reveal, and Winston Churchill is now back at the hotel. And it's now back in a brand new reading room. The hotel has had a lot of renovation throughout the years, and it's still going through renovation phases just to keep up with the times. For example, in the 1960s, the whole downtown of Ottawa changed. The train station was closed down to redirect all the trains outside of downtown. So the train station became conference rooms, and then the hotel had to pivot. There was no more trains coming right downtown. What are we going to do? We need to renovate. There was also a competition. More luxurious hotels were being built in Ottawa. In the 1940s, Lord Elgin was opened, and then eventually the Westin Hotel was opened. So the hotel had competition, it had to renovate. In the 1960s, they added TVs to the rooms. They also renovated a lot of the smaller rooms to larger rooms because the context has changed, the criteria for hotel rooms had changed, so they needed to modernize and have larger rooms. In the 1970s, they added a parking garage. People now were traveling by car. They were not traveling by train anymore, so they needed to park somewhere. So they built a several floor parking garage. In the 1980s, they changed again, a lot of renovation. They added restaurants, they added boutiques, an art gallery. They changed Zoe's Lounge, which used to be a convention hall, and now it's a nice restaurant where you can have high tea. Wilfred's restaurant was also added in the 80s, and the whole lobby was changed. So the lobby that we see now when we enter the hotel, that was all the renovation in the 1980s. And more recently, the hotel is going through another series of renovations. And so the reading room, when you enter the hotel and you turn to your right, you have a nice new bar there. So I encouraged you to go and visit the hotel. In the lobby and in the hallways on the first floor and in the reception, you can see old photographs and you can learn about the history of the hotel. So go. The Château Laurier is part of our lives and part of Ottawa, and it belongs to all of us. So go and have a drink, enjoy yourself, have high tea at the hotel, and think about the history of that building here in Ottawa.